Hello everybody, my name is Tiana Rockwell. I am a nutritional therapy practitioner from Grass Valley, California, and I'm excited to be taking over NTA's Facebook page for a little bit to tell you a little bit about me and what I'm up to. Thanks NTA for trusting me to take over the admin privileges for a couple minutes and share my story. Like I said, my name's Tiana Rockwell, and I have been an NTP since 2013. I'm going to share a little bit of my story from before I was an NTP, how I found the NTA, and my process of going through school, really NTA, and what I was up to at the time, how I kind of transitioned my life. I'm a full-time nutritionist now, and what I'm up to, projects I'm working on currently. And then at the end, I'll take questions. So if any of you guys have any questions for me, feel free to jot them into that Facebook section at the bottom, and I'll take any questions at the end. So a little bit about me before I found NTA. I think my parents, in lieu of safety, at a very, very young age, threw me into gymnastics when I was flipping off couches, and they were just worried I was going to break something. So they threw me into gymnastics, and I think little did they know I got my dad's very competitive athletic gene. My dad was a two-time Olympian in water polo. It became a very competitive thing for me. So it didn't take long before I was at practice for 4 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week easily, sometimes competing on that 7th day. My parents were commuting me an hour to and an hour from the gym that I was competing at so I could be with the very best coaches. And at that time, just like I think a lot of people from that era, my dad was definitely raised that way when he was an athlete, was taught that it was kind of a calories in, calories out mentality. I was lean and strong, and I was getting results as a gymnast, and so my parents just kept feeding me calories, and that worked. It seemed to be working at the time, and I see that a lot in practice. I work a lot with athletes now that when kids are young and they're very, very active, they can eat anything they want and they don't have any problems, which is of course not true, but it seems like that on the surface. So that philosophy was really great for me growing up. I was able to find success in athletics. I was able to take a collegiate scholarship in soccer to a Division I college, which was really great. But once I graduated from undergrad and my husband and I decided to open our own business, stress got the best of us, time got the best of us. We did not make time to do physical activity like we did when we were younger, and the food thing became an issue. It wasn't so much about calories in, calories out at that point. I was restricting calories, trying to stay healthy and fit, and it wasn't working. And I think I hear that story a lot, as do many NTPs and NTCs. And so I had to try something different. So because the time that we were taking with business, we were not making time for any physical activity, and so that was the first thing that I did, was I introduced some physical activity back into my world as an adult. It was in my mid-20s when this was going on, and I discovered a local all-women's triathlon in our area, which was, we live in a small town in Northern California, and this was a fundraiser for the hospital for breast cancer awareness, and I was really excited to be able to support that cause. And I was terrified out of my mind because I didn't know how to swim. I know how to swim, but I didn't know how to swim competitively in open water. I certainly didn't even own a bike at the time, and I felt like I could at least walk if I needed to. So it was quite the endeavor for me to take on the sprint triathlon, and I can relate to a lot of the women who are doing that now. We've got the sprint triathlon coming up in the middle of September, so just swimming in open water right now, super nervous, and I can relate because I was there. But at that time, I trained hard. I did the best I could. I competed that weekend for my first ever triathlon in 2009, and I absolutely fell in love with the sport. So I think that competitiveness that I had known my whole life growing up from gymnastics and soccer came back. It was a piece of my life that had been put on hold while I was trying to start my business with my husband, and I needed more of that in my life. So my husband and I started carving out more time for more sport, and we both started doing triathlon together. It was something that we would do outside of work. It got us talking about something besides work, which if you are in business with your husband or your spouse, you know how easy it can be just to talk about work all the time, and we know that that's not healthy for us. So we both took up the sport of triathlon, and then we met new friends through that sport, and our whole life started to change. In that very first year of doing my first triathlon and kind of getting back into sport again, I decided to start running more for more fitness, again, just trying to be healthy. And I started having some gut issues. I started not really being able to run at all without being able, I had to carry toilet paper with me. I didn't know where I was gonna have to go to the bathroom. I was plotting out routes where I knew I would be able to stop in different places because my gut was such an issue. And it finally got to the point where I knew I needed to seek help because it didn't matter what I was eating or not eating. I was having a lot of issues, especially when I was exerting any physical activity with sport, with running. So I'm really lucky because I discovered an NTP, a local NTP in our area. When I reached out and Googled nutritionist Grass Valley, she actually belonged to a business group that I belong to as well. It made logical sense for us to connect, and I'm really, really glad that I happened to fall into her schedule, and she changed my life. So since 2009, I have not been able to not get choked up when I talk about that. So Victoria Lafont, she is a instructor for NTA, which is great. She is a brilliant woman. NTA is so lucky to have her on their team. She's doing some rewriting of curriculum for them, which I'm really excited about because she is brilliant and into research and doing wonderful things for NTA. So I'm excited that I got my start with Victoria. She really, really, really seeded a passion for nutrition for me. And I think a big part of it was because she made it easy. We took baby steps at the beginning, just cutting some of the bad fats out of my diet. Eliminating dairy for me was a big trigger, and so we got to take that out. And I just started feeling so much better. I was sleeping better, I was recovering from workouts better, and certainly not having to carry toilet paper with me on runs. My gut was feeling so much better. So because of those things that we changed in my life, I think part of what Victoria was really excited for me with all my questions that I had for her. She was really urging me to look into going back to school for nutrition. She could see my passion in it with all my questions that I had for her during our appointments, and so she was the instrumental piece in my life that encouraged me to go to NTA to actually get school for myself. So that's what I did. My husband and I decided it was time for me to step away from our business and do my own thing. So in 2003, I went through an NTA program in San Francisco and graduated in November and took about 2 months, which I think is pretty common for people that graduate in November. I took November and December to kind of gather my thoughts and basically launched my business in January of 2014. And I was lucky because I was able to go all in. I basically completely quit working at my husband's business and do my own thing with my own private practice. So I rented a little tiny studio space that was big enough for me to be able to hold maybe about 8 to 10 people in there so I could hold some small group classes. I became a Restart instructor, and I teach Restart still to this day. It's one of my favorite programs to teach because it's so life-changing for people. And kind of hit the ground running. Since my passion is still with athletes and with because of my own story of how profoundly Victoria was able to change my life with changing some nutrition, that's really where my passion lies in my private practice. So I tend to work a lot with endurance athletes, mostly with triathletes, endurance runners, cyclists. But I also have a practice now. My office has currently moved to a strength and conditioning gym. So I'm starting to dabble a little bit more in the strength and conditioning world, which I absolutely love. So I would say if I had to claim myself as a specialist in anything, which I would like to say I don't, just talking to a friend yesterday that you feel like you don't know anything. There's just so much to learn. But if I had to consider myself a specialist at anything, it is definitely with endurance athletes in general, but definitely endurance. My passion lies in ketogenic diets for endurance athletes. I'm really, really big on nutrient timing, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And there is a time and a place that I find to be really successful in helping endurance athletes recover from workouts, recover from races by using a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, obviously with the most nutrient dense things we can find. So that's where a lot of my research is going right at the moment, and I'm developing a program that is a year long to be working with people with their diet so that they can have better success with their sport and have dreams come true that they didn't necessarily know they had, which was exactly what happened to me. Because of what Victoria and I did together over the years that I was one of her clients, I was able to race in 4 Ironman 70.3 World Championships, and that was never part of my plan ever. I just wanted to be able to race a small sprint triathlon without having gut issues, and before I knew it, when the diet got lined up with my lifestyle, big changes started happening for me, and that's the kind of stuff that I want to be able to provide to my clients as well. Of course, I want them to feel really good, sleep really well, have wonderful, profound health, but the bottom line is I want them to be able to dream big and live those dreams. And I do believe, because again, personal experience, that nutrition had a big piece of that for me, and I know it can for other people too. So that's really my goal for my clients. I always tell them when they're 70, 80 years old, I want them to be able to choose if they want to do their sport. And if they're not eating a correct diet, when they're not sleeping well, and they're not really taking care of themselves, that's where I step in to help them so that they can elect to be an athlete at 70 if they want to be. So the choice should be theirs, not something that's really taken away from them because of choices made in our previous life. So I think probably one of the foundations of my practice is bio-individual diets for people, which is a foundation of NTA, honoring everyone's bio-individuality, and it's no different for athletes. Endurance triathlete is not an endurance triathlete, is not an endurance. They're not all the same. Everyone is so different. So finding the right diet for the right person is a really big thing for me. And I have set up kind of my hierarchy of importance when I'm working with private clients in practice as to where we're going to jump in and start working together. So when clients come to me and they call to ask me to help them out with their diet for a race or for life or for training or recovery, anything like that, one of the first places I'm going to start, I've got 6 steps that I look at with clients. Step number 1 is always looking at quality. So that doesn't always mean organic. I mean, if they can afford to do all organic, of course, I'm a big proponent of that because it's keeping a lot of the toxic chemicals out of the diet, which is fantastic for recovery. But it really is just making sure we're getting the best quality food that they can afford within their lifestyle into their diet. It also, in this category, includes that bio-individuality piece, is the quality, or the diet, the right diet for their specific body. So this is where I do pull in some testing if I need to in private practice, food sensitivity testing, some hormone testing potentially, to see if there are foods that we can be including or excluding in the diet to really make the diet right for them. We know from research that whey protein powder is a fantastic tool to use for recovery from workouts, but if you have a sensitivity to dairy, sometimes, most of the time, it's obviously not the best thing for you to be consuming after a workout. So those are the types of things that we're discovering when we first look at quality of food. So if the quality of food is right for my clients and they've got that, generally speaking, mostly correct, then we're going to look at quantity. Are they eating enough foods, or are they eating too much food for their specific lifestyle? And this can get really tricky because I find that we're humans and we're creatures of habit, and we like to eat the same things, most people, over and over again. And most people that I find want to have a specific diet spread out like evenly throughout the day, and that's not always the best thing, because some days we work out really hard and some days we have a rest day, and so the quantity of food that we're eating on a day that we're training really hard and a day that we're resting may be very different. So those are the things that I'm looking at when I look at quality of food. And typically in my practice, especially with women, I find that most of them are not eating enough calories. So they're basically down-regulating their metabolism, and they don't understand why they're retaining weight when they're working out harder and eating less calories. Again, it's that calories in, calories out thing, which I don't personally find works very well for a lot of people in general, but athletes especially. So once we get them actually eating the appropriate amount of food to support their lifestyle, they start to see benefits, which is great. So first quality, then quantity. Once those two things have been dialed in, we're going to start looking at the reason that they're eating. Are they eating because they're bored, or they're tired, or they're stressed out? These are all things that can really play a role in people's physique or their ability to perform. So we always take a look at that, and that is typically where I end up pulling in other specialists. And that is such a wonderful thing about the NTA community, is there are so many people out there that specialize in things that I don't specialize in. And if there is a psychological component to eating for people, that is not my specialty. So pulling in somebody like an NTP or an NTC who has background in that is so wonderful. And it's great that I can 100% trust that they're not going to tell my clients, hey, you need to be eating a bunch of pasta the night before your big training day, because the foundation with all of us is exactly the same, even though we've all got our own specialty or people that we work with regularly. So a lot of times if there's a client who's struggling with the reason they're eating, that would be something I would start working with another NTP or NTC on, which is great to have them available. If their quality of food is right and the quantity is right and the reason is right, we're going to start looking at the method of eating. And this really deals a lot with digestion for a lot of people. Typically speaking, most endurance athletes are very driven type A personalities. A lot of them own their own business, or they're high up in the chain of their company. They have families that they're running. They're doing their own food prep. I mean, they just have a lot on their plate. And this can happen with any sport or anybody outside of sport for sure. But I find that these people are typically a lot of times like eating in front of their computer while they're still trying to work, or eating in their car while they're driving to the pool, or any of those things. And that can obviously pose a really big problem for the way that we're getting the nutrients into our system. So we focus a lot on making sure we're eating away from the television, which was one of the very first things Victoria had me do besides take dairy out of my diet. And it is, if I had to say one thing, if I had to just label one thing that changed my life, the biggest, it was getting away from the television for dinner. So my husband and I connect on a much deeper level now, which is great because we're at the dinner table connecting over our days. And there's just a lot that happened around having a meal away from the TV. So those are the types of things that we're looking at when we look at method of meal consumption. So again, looking at quality first, quantity second, the reason we're eating third, whether or not we're eating in the appropriate method, chewing our food well, eating with a fork and knife, that kind of stuff. We will then look at consistency. So we want to get 1 through 4 correct most of the time. I'm a really big proponent of the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time we get those things right. 20% of the time it's okay to be a little bit more flexible. And that's the kind of stuff that we look at with consistency, is getting those quality, quantity, reason, and method right most of the time. And if that's the case, the thing that makes the biggest difference for athletes, whether you're a young kid or a 70-year-old, whether you're an endurance athlete or a strength athlete, is nutrient timing. So eating the exact same things over and over in the same quantities at all your meals at the same time of day is not always the best approach for athletes specifically. Knowing what to eat and when to eat it, especially before, during, and after workouts, can be a really critical component for those athletes to have their most advantageous performance and especially recovery from workouts. So I can't help somebody with a nutrient timing piece if they don't have those other things right. Because if they're putting the wrong foods in the diet in the wrong ways, doesn't really matter when they put them in, it's not going to be right for them. So if an athlete comes to me and they're getting the right foods into the body in the right quantities and they're eating in the appropriate methods for the right reasons, most of the time we can jump right to nutrient timing, which is where I feel like my sweet spot is, and I absolutely love to get there with my clients because that's where we really start to see profound differences in people's performance and recovery. It's when we can actually time, a lot of times, macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat around workouts so that they can actually recover quickly, sometimes do 2 or 3 workouts in a day. Those are the types of things that are really important for athletes' performance. So that's kind of the hierarchy of importance for nutrients that I really work through with a lot of my clients, especially athletes, to make sure they're getting the most out of their diet and their performance. I'm pretty excited to have been asked by NTA to be one of the instructors for their brand new program that they're launching, the Foundational Wellness Program. And I did a very small piece on how to move your body for optimal health. And I think that is a piece that I was really passionate about because, again, one of the things that I find, because, again, I fell in the trap of it myself, of most of us sit at a computer all day long, and then we go train really, really hard at night. I have a lot of athletes that do that. And so that is not typically a very ancestral approach to movement. And we see a lot of issues with athletes, mobility especially, but diet, a lot of those things can come around that movement piece. So I was really excited to be able to talk to NTA and to help develop this movement piece for this program. And I'm excited as an NTP because I do feel like, and I think a lot of NTPs and NTCs have the same issue where they're going through the foundations, the basics with our clients over and over again. Like I talked about that hierarchy. If I can get a client coming to me with those 5 things, the first 5 things being pretty dialed in, I can dial in with them the rest of the nutrition piece so that they really can thrive in their sport. And that's the thing that I think that the Foundational Wellness Program is really going to give people, which I am thrilled about because it's going to be accessible and affordable and at people's own pace, which is really great. So it's hard for people to get off work and come see me every 3 or 4 weeks to get that foundation set. So if they can do that in the privacy of their own home at night when their kids are in bed or whenever they want to do it, that's fantastic. So thanks NTA for letting me be a part of that. I'm excited to be able to share my passion about movement and about health and nutrition with the whole world. The more people I can spread the word about, the better, because I think people really deserve to know. That is probably one of the biggest ahas that I have for my clients. They almost get angry in a sense that they can't believe that they didn't know that we weren't supposed to carb load so much before races, and how we can actually feel so much better when we don't do that. So there's a lot of misconceptions about diet and nutrition out there that I love to be able to change people's minds about. So one of the areas that I'm moving in with my own private practice is a little bit more into the coaching realm, the physical coaching realm besides nutrition coaching. I think I come from a little different angle. A lot of the people that were in my program with NTA in 2013 were personal trainers. And I can see where having a program like NTA is so critical for them because the nutrition piece for a lot of them was the missing piece for them to be able to get the results that they wanted with their clients. So to have more knowledge on nutrition was a really big piece for them. And I'm coming at it from the opposite perspective. I was an athlete. I'm now a nutritionist. I've been a nutritionist really since early 2014. And I'm starting to see some of the private clients that I see who don't have a fantastic physical training piece. Coaches that still believe that people should be carb loading and they should be consuming tons and tons of sugar while they're working out. And that's not necessarily a philosophy that I think works for a lot of people. So that bio-individuality piece certainly isn't there. And so that's where I'm taking my private practice more into that realm to be able to offer more full service programming for my clients so they can have the nutrition programming piece in with the coaching piece. And a lot of endurance coaching is done online. So be offering programming for my clients online and be able to put the nutrition piece in there, how they should be eating pre, post, and during those workouts so they have it all and they're not having to work with multiple coaches. So it's a little bit about where I'm taking my practice. I'm really excited about it. I have been accepted to the University of Washington for Master's in Exercise Sports Science, so working on some prerequisites for that right now, and we'll be doing some testing with USAT, the USA Triathlon community, for coaching here in the near future. So I'm just going to check the feed right now and see if there's any questions from anyone. Bianca was asking, did the NTP program equip you for all the great work that you're doing, or did you pursue further education? Well, NTA set a fantastic foundation. I should share a quick story about where I was at when I went into NTA. I will never forget the first day that I sat down in class and I did not know a soul in my program. I sat behind 2 girls that were talking about their kombucha scobies, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't know what kombucha was. I didn't know what a SCOBY was. And the way they were talking about it, there was a moment where I felt like I am on a foreign planet and I do not belong in this program. But it was obviously within seconds when the teacher started speaking to us that I knew I was in the right place at the right moment. But my level of education with nutrition was very low. I mean, really just what I had learned from Victoria in our short time that we had together through private consultations. So NTA really set me up to feel confident to work one-to-one with private clients right from the get-go, which I appreciate. I mean, obviously it was scary jumping into having my own business, but generally speaking, the foundations were there. And you hear it over and over again at school: start with the foundations, start with the foundations, start with the foundations. And as long as I did that, clients were getting success. Since that time, I've done some further training in some of the testing. So I do run the OAT test, which is the organic acid test, and some myotoxin testing and blood tests and food sensitivity tests. So I've done continuing education with those labs to really understand how to interpret those tests a lot better. And that's been a really, really big piece for me, because I can get to the bottom of inflammation. If I can see inflammation in a blood panel, it's really helpful for me to really connect those pieces for my patients, or for my clients. So that is some further training that I've pursued in my practice to help with that. So Jeff's asking how much protein is safe to consume. That's arguable. I think there's a lot of research out there that says lots of different things. My typical recommendation for strength-based athletes who are trying to build muscle, which is one of the reasons that people would want to consume a lot of protein, is about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of lean body mass. So I don't typically recommend a lot more than that for people, unless they're high performance athletes like CrossFit game athletes or competitive strength-based athletes. So that's the general recommendation. For my endurance athletes who are not trying to bulk up or build more strength, the recommendation is probably going to be closer to 0.6 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. Most scales now will tell you a general recommendation of lean body mass, so that's what I have people do. And the DEXA scanning is my preferred way of actually getting to the bottom of where the fat is, how much fat someone has on their body, what lean body mass they have. If their body is balanced right to left side, there's a lot of information we can get from a DEXA scan. And if you're in a big town, I mean, we have to drive about an hour to get to Sacramento, but there are DEXA scans there that you can do for like 35 or 40 bucks. So you get a lot of information from a pretty cheap test that takes about 15 minutes, and it's very accurate. So that would be my way to find out how much lean body mass you have. Also asking about what I recommend for recovery. My go-to for recovery is almost always whey protein powder, a good quality grass-fed whey protein powder. I personally use Vital Proteins because it is an organic grass-fed whey protein powder, and that is the only ingredient in there. There's not other fillers in there at all. But those are really only for people who can tolerate dairy really well. There's some other really great plant-based protein powders that you can use post-workout, but one of my go-to post-workout meals is bone broth with some white rice. So I'll make a batch of bone broth, a lot of times in my Instant Pot, and it's really great because if you worked out really hard, getting in some easy to digest proteins and a good amount of electrolytes that you can get from unrefined sea salt, it tastes really good to me to be able to have some, and I'll eat it hot or cold, rice, chicken, and bone broth. Sometimes I won't even add chicken in there, just depending on how hard the workout is. So real food recovery, looking for a little bit of starch, some protein, electrolytes. That's really what I recommend. Rhonda's asking about where I got the training on the labs. Almost all of the labs that I run through the companies offer continuing education. So you have to be willing, at least I had to be willing because they aren't coming to Grass Valley, unfortunately, to travel. So I just recently spent a week in Boulder doing some training with Great Plains Laboratory, which was fantastic. Apex Energetics, which is a supplement company that I have an account with, offers a lot of continuing education, especially on blood interpretation. So that's where I got a lot of my training in the blood interpretation. And those, a lot of times, are free. The Great Plains conference that I was at was not free, and especially was not free because I had to fly there. But if you are in a bigger town or have access, family, something living in a big town, it's really great to be able to access those conferences. You'll get a ton of information. But the Apex seminars, if you're an Apex supplier, then a lot of those conferences are free. So there's a lot of companies that offer the same thing. Any other questions that anyone has? I'll scroll through this really quickly. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. I appreciate all of you guys coming on. Lisa, I'm excited for you to start your NTP program next month. It's such an amazing program, life-changing, not only for yourself and your family, but just for other people. I want more NTPs and NTCs to graduate and take what they know outside into the world. There's room for all of us. So I'm excited to see more and more NTPs and NTCs signing up for the program. So Rhonda's asking, what do I use to test toxicity? Great Plains Laboratory has a myotoxin, and it's called the GPL toxin, the myotoxin test. One is testing non-metal chemical toxicity, and the other one's testing molds, basically. So, and they're all urine metabolite. They're testing urine metabolites. So it's really, really nice for clients because they don't have to do a blood draw. So I contact the lab ships the kit directly to my client. There's some instructions in the kit on like foods to avoid for 48 hours. I encourage my clients to do an infrared sauna treatment within 24 hours of doing the urine sample to just kind of release some of the toxins that may be in their system. And then we'll get the report usually within 10 days. And the really, really great thing about a lot of these tests is, and it's a feature that I always use, even though I've gone to the conferences and done research and learned to interpret these tests, I always call in to have a physician review it with me. So they always have advisors at these labs that will provide free consultations on how to do the interpretation. And it's always nice to have a second set of eyes looking at the lab test to make sure that I'm not missing something. If there's some trend that's happening in Northern California, for example, they can let me know that they're seeing this regularly and not to worry too much about it. These are all things that I really, really like to have access to those things, and they're all available with these labs. So that's the toxicity test that I use. There is some really wonderful information with hair tissue mineral analysis, but that is, again, not a specialty of mine. There are a lot of NTPs out there that do specialize in hair tissue mineral, and that would be something that I would certainly refer out. But you can get a ton of toxicity information from hair tissue mineral as well. Nice to see you too, Colette. So I'm glad everybody was able to join me today. I'm assuming this will be recorded. So if you have any friends or family that are athletes and they want to get a little more information on like the hierarchy of importance, it's a really, really great thing for people to kind of hit so they don't just jump straight to, it's the most common question I get with all my clients. What do I eat pre and post workout? You got to get the nutrient hierarchy right first in order for that to even work. So share the video. Hopefully it can encourage people to start focusing on quality and quantity and the reason they're eating and the method they're eating before they jump into nutrient timing to really see the benefits that their body can give them with their athletic performance. And hopefully all of their athletic dreams will come true afterwards, which is my goal, of course, for everybody. So it was a pleasure to be with NTA and all of you guys today, and I am free to always answer questions. My website is tryrealfood.com, T-R-I, like the triathlon, and I look forward to hearing from any and all of you if you have any questions. So thank you so much for sharing some time with me, and good luck and the best to all of you. Thank you.